That's right, we've pulled up the tier list maker, and we're going to see how the meta's looking for this month. Smash that little crap out of that subscribe button so I can read all the comments from people going, Robbie, you didn't cover my deck! Why is X not on this list? Well, first of all, I'm going to be honest with you, this wasn't my tier list. I just pulled one up to talk about the meta. So we're going to start things off here with Rikasun Avalon. So Rikasun Avalon it's been riding like the 1.75 line in my personal opinion for a little while. The thing is at this point in time that it has not had a lot of success out of the last month. And I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. It's just the deck is, I don't know, it's kind of struggles with a lot of the meta. And don't get me wrong, it's still an incredibly good deck. All right, that's one of the biggest things that people need to understand when we look at this. This is where we're sitting. This is interesting. So, Chimera Branded, week 1, week 2 had crazy results out of August. It was, people were crapping their pants. This was the hottest new innovation since literal anything, all right? But what ended up happening the last week actually tells an incredibly interesting tale of the format. We saw the lowest representation of Chimera Branded out of the entire format. All right, so you have 2 weeks of just explosive, the meta is rocking the boat. And then all of a sudden, Chimera I don't know if people were just citing very heavily for it. I did see a lot of, contact Cs, a lot of power cards that just non-fusionary was even one. I know contact C doesn't really matter for the case of this, but I was just looking at my notes here and I was like, oh, okay, we've got magic deflectors too. Like, people are doing some really weird things to try to slow this deck down. And it looks like it worked. It really took a lesser stand in the meta, and I do think it is still a tier 1 deck, but for the last week of results, it just got bullied, and I guess we'll leave it up here for now. It is in such a weird place. For higher, Runick. So this is by far, I think, the scariest variant of the deck. But the problem is it's not getting regional tops right now. I mean, yeah, you can top 16 a regional with this all day long, sure. But if you're trying to get the X1, it's a lot harder at the moment. And I'm going to leave it in 1.5 because the insane draw combo that this deck has is actually just the nuts. Like, the deck is actually incredibly scary, but yeah, we'll leave it in 1. Is very low 1.75. Here I'm going to leave in Rogue. I don't need an entire explanation to you as to why this deck can sometimes do things and sometimes that it can't. Floowandereeze is going to be our benchmark here for tier 2 right now. I think by far that this is probably the best tier 2 deck in the room. Floowandereeze has been a consistent monster. Like, I saw this deck do top 16s, it's doing top 8 loop-de-loops. People are not playing around end pen right now, and it really shows, actually. I think that this deck, people really, really, really need to be aware that this is something that's doing things in the meta. Altergeist, I'm going to toss down here in Rogue. It's just not performing. I think it had 1 top, and that was it. When you're getting gatekeeped by the other trap deck in the room, you're just not as consistent as you think you are. Rescue Ace I'm tossing up here in 1.5. Rescue Ace has been pulling 3 to 5 tops a week. And, I mean, I'm not going to discredit that at all. I think that this deck, for what it is doing, has been pretty strong, honestly. People have found ways to genuinely play this, and I actually think that's a good thing. Infernoble. Now, do I think this is better than for higher Runick? No, I'm actually going to put this below Floowandereeze. I mean, this is pulling consistent results. I'm going to put this directly underneath this. This deck is doing things not unlike the large scale. Floowandereeze is doing better, though. I just don't consider Floowandereeze a tier 1.5 deck. We're going to put Cash Tier up here. If you don't consider this deck one of the better decks in the room, it is pulling the most consistent numbers in the meta right now. It's so annoying to say that, but yeah, that's where we're sitting. Labyrinth is going to maintain its presence here. I mean, like, I'm not all that surprised. This deck has been the little angry duelist deck in the room. It still does things. Marincess? This is actually interesting. I do think that Marincess is very much one of the better roguish decks, or one of the tier 2 decks in the room. This does get pretty consistent results. I honestly think both of these are tied right now in terms of tops, from what we've seen. Mathmech? I'm gonna put this here. I think that Mathmech still kind of does the same thing it does. I would almost filter these into like Rogue. Branded, oh boy, it's still up here, but it's not. Branded is falling quickly. Like, I feel bad for this deck. This deck is not having a good time at all. It's, at least Enpin jumped back up to grab back a hold of the meta. Purely, yeah, I mean, like, these are your top 3 decks. Like, you don't really get much of a reason to argue this. Like, this is just the consistent monster, this is the second consistent monster, and this deck is just hopping along, doing what it wants to do. Vanquish Soul. I'm gonna put this down here in Rogue. I mean, it's still topping regionals, but I think it's more roguish than really anything at this point in time. Call it what it is. Deck is still pretty cool. Synchro Turbo. This is definitely better than Altergeist and Heroes. Like, honestly, this deck is pretty good still. What else we got here? Hey, Manadium. At this point in time, I'm going to put Manadium at 1.75. You pick your flavor. You're either going to Calamity's Turbo lock your opponent. Your opponent's going to be very upset with you. Or you're going to Dissipate or Baron lock your opponent. They're going to have a bad time either way. It's just a little bit more combo-y variance than we're kind of used to seeing at this point in time. Once again, it doesn't mean that the deck is necessarily bad. Just kind of where we're sitting right now. Hey, the Salamangreat. I'm actually going to bump this above Vanquishal. This is kind of like the new flavor of the time. Like, the Fire Duels pack was cool. It definitely, I think it really changed a lot of the aspects of ways of thinking. And I mean, also brings another reason to play Nibiru into the format. Sky Striker, I'm sorry. This deck just isn't good right now. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like, I thought you could get away with being Rogue, but you're just not. It's a sad reality of things. Dragon Link I'm also going to put up here a little bit above Branded. I think this deck it's still very consistent in what it wants to do. It bugs your opponent. They're like, oh, I can't even make a board. Pure Runick. I'm going to put this down here in Rogue. I'm going to put it right here. Yeah, it's kind of fallen. Sword Soul. You know, I'm going to put it right here. Sword Soul's not good right now. I was reading some comments from people going, Robbie, why aren't you talking about Sword Soul? The deck's good. It's not getting tops. Like, it's I think we've seen the level of power creep that knocked the stool out from underneath it, at least for this current point in time. We'll have to wait and see. The deck is still good. It still does things. All right. Be patient. I'm sure List could put this back on top. Tier, I'm also going to put back here in Tier 2. I think that this deck is still pretty good in terms of what it does for the meta. Unchained. Now, this is interesting. I'm going to put Unchained right here. I think that Unchained is by far probably the 4th best deck in the room. I think that people don't know how to play around it. I think a lot of the interactions are pretty crazy. And so many people are just like, oh, okay. I just lose to that. And then Spright. You know what's very interesting about Spright? This deck is, it's falling from grace at a pretty quick rate. Actually, Mathmech now officially has more tops out of the block than Spright was kind of pulling together. Spright as an engine just kind of isn't really performing. And it's kind of sad. And the only reason why I'm leaving this version of the deck up here is because the insane draw or power that it actually can do. But I mean, everything in this block, actually kind of into this block right here, have been topping regionals. When you have such a good spread of regional data like this, that's amazing. Alright, so what do you think? Please, leave a comment down below, tell me what you guys think. I'll see your beautiful faces back here in a day, guys. Peace out. Patrons, thank you. ya!
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.